Someone once approached the Buddha and said, "I want happiness." The Buddha replied, "First remove I, then remove want. What is left?" We all desire happiness, but could the desire itself be what's preventing us from truly being happy? I've talked before about desire. What is it? Simply put, desire is craving. To crave something means, first of all, that we recognize that we don't have it. Otherwise, why would we crave it? And the craving to have it causes us to suffer. Craving means that we aren't satisfied. We aren't content. We're in resistance to what is. And when we're in resistance, naturally we're unhappy. So could it be that our desire for happiness itself is the cause of our unhappiness? This is a difficult paradox because naturally we want to be happy. But how can we be happy as long as we're wanting? And how can we not want to be happy? Does this mean we should just be miserable? We imagine that the perfect life would have no challenges, no difficulties, no pain or discomfort. And we imagine that only such a life could give us happiness. But this is completely unrealistic. The fact is that life is often difficult. We experience loss, we experience disappointment, we experience pain and discomfort. We often say that life is unfair, but what does that even mean? What is it that we feel that we're entitled to? Fairness is according to our interpretation. The fact is that life is neither fair nor unfair. It simply is as it is. The question is, can we accept it? The philosopher Bertrand Russell once said that the secret of happiness is to accept the fact that the world is a horrible place. This statement might sound bleak and hopeless, but actually there's a lot of wisdom in it. So much of our suffering is the result of mental resistance. We see the ugliness in the world. We see the ugliness in our own lives. And mentally, we resist it. We try to push it away and escape it. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't strive to make the world a better place. But first we have to acknowledge the ugliness and accept that it's there. I've said before that acceptance doesn't mean that we're condoning anything. It simply means that we're acknowledging it, that we aren't mentally resisting it. When I talk about resistance and acceptance, I'm only talking in terms of the mind. I'm not suggesting that we don't take action, but in the mind, we have to learn to accept the situation. For instance, if I'm ill, I'll do everything in my power to improve my health. If there's an infection in the body, then naturally I want the body to resist it. But I also have to pay very close attention to what's going on in the mind, because the mind will often react with resistance as well. And that only creates suffering. Suffering is solely in the mind, not to be confused with pain, which is solely in the body. So if there's pain in the body, what good is it to add mental suffering? This only makes the situation that much more unbearable. And in fact, there is evidence that mental suffering can negatively affect the body. It can weaken the immune system. So even from a purely medical standpoint, we can understand that mental stress is physically unhealthy. So the question is, can we accept the body is ill? Can we be at peace with it? I'm not suggesting that this is easy to do, but we should at least try to understand. We should understand that the mind and the body are closely connected, but they're also distinctly different. We may not be able to exercise much control over the body. If the body becomes ill, we can only do so much. Where we have the most control, however, is in the mind. Can we learn to maintain a peaceful mind even when the body is in pain? So much of our seeking for happiness is dependent upon circumstances. Again, we only have so much control over our circumstances. But where we do have the most control is over our reactions. And this comes back to acceptance. What if, instead of searching for happiness, we simply accepted life as it is right now? And that includes whatever sadness we might be feeling. What if we simply accepted the fact that everything isn't perfect, that there are challenges and difficulties, that there is pain and discomfort? But instead of dwelling on those things, we turned our attention to the areas of our life where there is goodness. It might seem difficult to do this because we're so accustomed to focusing on everything that's wrong. We've essentially programmed ourselves to do this, and so it can take a bit of practice to change our thought patterns. But it's not impossible, and we shouldn't expect that everything is going to change all of a sudden, but we can make a small effort to shift our focus. I often talk about being realistic. Being realistic means that we acknowledge all of the imperfections. We acknowledge where things have gone wrong. We acknowledge that there is pain and discomfort. But being realistic means that we also acknowledge the positive. No matter how unfortunate our situation may be, it could always be worse. So the question is, what can we find in our circumstances that we can be grateful for? And there's always something to be grateful for. We've just gotten so accustomed to overlooking those things and magnifying what's wrong. It's like we have blinders on that only allow us to see the negative in any situation. Yes, the negative is there, but so is the positive. So why do we focus primarily on the one and not on the other? Can we acknowledge both at the same time? Some people have gotten the idea that in order to be happy, you have to ignore all of the negative. But I don't think this really works. We can try to ignore it, but if it's there, it's there. And we can only ignore it for so long. I think that when we try to focus only on the positive, we often find ourselves disappointed because the negative doesn't simply go away. There's always going to be some challenge, some discomfort. So the question is, can we simply accept that? Perhaps the way to be happy is not about making everything perfect, but by accepting all of the imperfections. And that means accepting the suffering as well. When we're feeling sad or frustrated or angry or anxious, can we simply accept that as a part of life? When we do, when we stop resisting these feelings, they actually decrease. The more that we accept them, the more we feel content and at peace. So perhaps this is what allows for happiness to occur. Not that happiness is something we get by striving for it, but that it's something that occurs naturally when we simply accept life as it is. When we make happiness the objective, the final destination, it always seems to elude us. But when we focus on our own personal growth, on living from inspiration, on letting go of attachments and expectations. Happiness comes as a consequence, as a byproduct, without any need to seek it out.